Okay, I'm unmuted. All right, hey, good afternoon. Just doing a little impromptu training here since we if you go to the chat, I've included a link to a Jamboard. So if you go into the chat, there's a link at the very top there, and if you click on that, that should take you to the Jamboard session. And just to practice a little bit, you don't see the link?
I got the link, but I was here when you started, so it was on there from the beginning. I don't know if new people come in and see the link.
Yeah, maybe it's like that. Okay, I just dropped it back in again. Yeah, so you're joining in. So just real quick, what I was looking to do with this at the beginning is just have you guys start dropping some ideas on the type of training that you guys would like to see in this 1 hour period. We had a lot of feedback a while ago that we didn't have any specific training classes we were doing. And you know, we were trying to put together a little training program. You know, the first thing you have to have is a time. So we figured out a 1 hour time slot for the PMs, drafting, and takeoff. And then the second thing you have to have is content. So I lined up some content for the takeoff, kind of starting at the beginning of the process and working all the way through, you know, programming and the CNC stuff. And so we have like 6 or 7 classes outlined. And my original thought was, okay, as somebody finishes the class, then they could go to somebody else and say, hey, could you do a class, please? And maybe they have an idea on what to do it on, or maybe that person picks it, right? But I don't know that that worked out very well. So what I'd like to do is have you guys just come in here on the Jamboard right now and just add some ideas of things you'd like to see for training. I know you guys have all used the Jamboard before. You just click the little sticky note and then go from there. And nobody has a single idea.
I don't see the Jamboard, Steve.
Oh, did you go to the Jamboard on your, I'm not showing it on the screen.
We don't have access. We don't have access to edit.
Yeah, I can find the sticky notes too.
Oh, hang on. I said anyone can link. Let me change this. Hang on. My fault.
Oh. I opened up the link.
You stick it in the chat, Steve. We can grab it from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did put it in the chat, but it's not the way. So I put it in the chat again.
I opened it. It opened. Yeah.
It's set to view only. So I don't know, Steve, if we select request edit access, what that looks like on your end if we send you a bunch of requests.
Please send me a request. Let me see.
And
I
mine
just did, so I'm waiting.
Mine is saying there are currently too many people viewing this file. Try again later.
That's what mine says too.
You see mine?
Well, there you go. Interesting. I put it on share. I've got it on public.
So for people whose last names begin A through.
For all drafting managers, please exit.
Yeah, no. Okay, I've changed the permissions. Hopefully that works now. And edit at this point. You might have to drop out and come back if it didn't just automatically update.
Works for me.
Okay.
Yeah. You have to sign in. Well, for me,
I dropped out and came back, and
It works now.
Okay. So you can put stuff on it now? Good. I guess we all learn as we go. Maybe one of the classes should be how to do a Jamboard. Nice. So maybe what we could do is just brainstorm on a few ideas of what we could do for training. So tech wall installation, I love that. maybe system design. Do you guys know how the W75 is designed and how it handles water and seismic and movement and all that?
Not entirely. So that one's a good one too.
We could do engineering 101, like how we calculate deflection or anchors and things like that on curtain walls. It would be good to know if you're drawing a curtain wall, like how much wind load you can take on an anchor or a fastener. Does everybody understand auto details? How to use those in the Takeoff group?
No, apparently not everybody, and it's good that it's anonymous.
Yes, it is. And it is anonymous, so you can put anything on it. How about just panels in general? Do you know why we use composite versus plates? Good Revit class for the Takeoff group.
In design, a new
Say that
system
again, Ron.
in design right now that's coming out soon. I said, isn't there a new system in design? Maybe we can go over that. Aren't we working on a new system within Jumpstart?
Yep.
I don't know what it's called, so I don't know what to put on there for it, but we can go over the design and what improvements it's got over our W75.
All right, I'll put that on there. Next gen W75. Cool.
Looks like somebody just put it up there, so that's good.
And not just the field guys, but
Geometric calculations.
Jose's way, I like it.
That class is going to be broken into 10 classes.
Maybe Mario's way too.
Say that again.
I said maybe geometric calculations Mario's way, because Mario does a little different than Joey, maybe both ways, so people can understand both. Get both.
We
logics.
can do it the same. Now,
One way is
Steve,
easier
going back to
when you're in the shop.
Going back to the reason why we use the composite versus aluminum panels.
Mm-hmm.
Can you answer that in one sentence?
Yes. So composite panels have an advantage in that and the color is more consistent.
Oops, it's breaking up.
I said the composite panels have an advantage because they're flatter.
Oh,
They have a more consistent color finish because they're done in coil coat. And they're much less expensive to supply and fabricate. But they have a disadvantage in the fact that they're a little weaker and they damage easily. And that they have, you know, the fabrication isn't as clean as, like, say, a folded, welded, ground smooth aluminum panel. So there's a few advantages and disadvantages, but cost, flatness, and color consistency are the main advantages.
They're a little lighter too, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely lighter. Yeah, but that could be a disadvantage too when you get a big old panel and it wants to whip around in the wind out in the dark.
And I will add one more. It is a far rated, is better insulation.
When it comes to deflection, which one will deflect more than the other?
The plate panel is stiffer, so it deflects less.
Okay.
But when you put that panel through a paint oven, sometimes the flatness is the issue, you know, on the job. spinning their little stickies. That's Spanish for shop use. I love it.
One that really caught my eye is this one right here, that curve conditions. Lately, we've seen a lot of job setups where, like one Westside 1951, have a curve where it jogs up and down. I think if we know what the installation sequence is or how it gets installed, we might be able to fab it and assemble it in the shop for better use, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be good. It's good. Yeah, like getting some great ideas here. I just want to, brainstorm a little bit because, I think it's important. We want to dedicate this hour to making you guys better. The better the team is, the better the company is, right? So the things that you guys feel like, hey, if I had to go find a job someplace and I had to go, apply and for asking me about what I know, what are the things you want to know? You know what I mean? So. Somebody's experimenting with the clippings and other things. All right, let's flip over to the second page. Up at the top, there's a little thing where we can go from 1 to 2. You guys can add more here as you think of them. But let's flip over to the second page, a nice blank page, because we're going to use that for some other things in this discussion. This isn't a long presentation, probably won't be the full hour, but this is something I did with the PMs before, and I thought it'd be very useful for you guys too, especially, as we're home and we're trying to work, from home, just the idea of, how do we apply lean in our own personal lives and to be more productive and, be able to get the things done each day that we need to get done. So this, like I said, it's a little bit geared around more like project management, but it applies the same way. We'll just use different examples. So the first concept I want to get into is the idea of the 80-20 principle. So when we look at, back in the early, 1900s, there was a statistician named Vilfredo Pareto, and he had looked at the wealth in Italy and had found that 80% of the wealth was held by 20% of the people. And he found that an interesting statistic, and as he started looking around more, he was seeing that ratio showed up in a lot of things. And over the years, people call it the Pareto principle or the 80-20 principle, but this very specific idea that 80% of the things you do, really only account for about 20% of the results, but about 20% of the things you do actually show up in about 80% of the results. So, typical ratios you might see are, 80% of our company's business comes from about 20% of its customers, right? We don't, it's not equal all across the board. Every customer doesn't give us the same number of jobs. We do way more, Vance Brown, DevCon level 10 work than we do Hathaway, PenCal, or, Trubeck, right? So 80% of our business comes from about 20% of, the customers. 80% of the invoices that we receive in this company come from 20% of the vendors, because about 80% of the things we buy come from about 20% of the people we buy from, right? So this ratio is pretty typical in life. And I think it's a very critical concept to understand, because when it comes to your own personal productivity, this is going to apply. You probably wear 20% of your clothes 80% of the time, right? You probably spend, 80% of your time in 20% of your house, right? This is the typical, sort of ratio of the world, and what people have found is it's pretty just generic all across the board, right? So it applies to almost anything. So the thing is like all the time that you spend at work, it's not the same, so high value activities for the Takeoff group would be, doing a takeoff or checking a takeoff or, getting the information to the PM, writing the work orders, creating the CNC files, going and talking to the shop about how it's going. Like these are the high value activities. And then we have our low value activities, right? Which is going to be, you know, the waste of like trying to find the files because somebody put them in the wrong place, or waiting for the UPD to go through because somebody's got it on the server and we all have to go off the same server. You know, like I'm waiting for somebody to get done with the database so I can get it, so I can do my work. You know, these are the low value activities, right? So again, most of the things you do are not equal. And so we're going to separate what we're doing every day into sort of these high value and low value activities. So the way to look at this really is just to give you a good example of how to play. You know, you work approximately about 2,000 hours a year, which is 52 weeks and 40 hours, which is like 2,080 hours, less your vacation time, right? So take the first part of your annual, you know, take the first part of your annual salary and divide it by 2, and you get your cost per hour. So if you're making 50 grand a year, divided by 2,000, you're making about 25 bucks. If you're making 75,000, you're making about 37.50. So you can do this math pretty easy in your head. If you're making, you know, 25,000 bucks a year, it's half of that, right? 1250 or whatever, right? So you can do that math pretty quick. So just for your own self, you know about what you're making, just run that number real quick in your head. And then, you know, because we have benefits and you know, life insurance and you know, all these other things, about 30% more of that goes on top for what we actually spend. So what we're giving you is, you know, 30% less than what it costs us because we're paying for healthcare and, you know, vacations and all the other stuff, right? So add another 30% and it gets you about, so in our first example, if you're making about 75 grand a year, then you're basically in the $50 an hour. So a lot of people think that their day is set up like this, right? You're going to work, you know, an 8-hour day. And so I'm kind of going through my day, and each hour, Randy and Chris are giving me 50 bucks, right? It's like from 8 to 9, I get 50 bucks. From 9 to 10, I get 50 bucks. So each hour of the day, Randy and Chris are taking 50 bucks and handing it to you. Okay, here you go. Like, thank you for doing the work. Here's your $50, right? And this is kind of how people picture the sort of salary equation, right? But in reality, your day looks more like, you know, it's really like I come in the morning, you know, maybe I got up a little late and I was really kind of hungry, so I made a little breakfast, and then I wandered up to my office and there were some text messages going on and some emails, so I kind of handled those, and then I had to call somebody about the database because they were using it, and they said, oh, I'm not quite done with it, so I thought, no, maybe I'll get some orange juice and come back and make a little, maybe a latte would be good this morning, so I'll go make a latte and come back, and you know, so the first hour is really worth about 10 bucks, right? Then the second hour, you know, you're picking up some steam, so you're getting up to about $40 an hour because you started doing some takeoffs and things like that. But then, you know, at 10 a.m. you ended up in a meeting, so you know that whole hour was just sitting in a meeting, and really a lot of people were talking about precast stuff, and it all, you know, just went that way, and none of it really had to apply to you. So that really about $25. Then, you know, 11 o'clock, man, I'm doing actual takeoffs. I'm making actual tickets. I'm turning stuff out. I'm worth about 90 bucks an hour at this point, right? Because I'm doing mostly high value work, right? Then I take my lunch. So you can kind of see the pattern, right? It's like some stuff we do during the day is worth way more than what we're making. And then other stuff we're doing through the day is worth way less than what we're making. And someplace over the course of, you know, an entire year, we're going to average it out and say it's worth about X, right? So that's kind of the way the day really plays, right? So the way I like to put it is, before you start your work in the morning, just think to yourself, if I had to go to, you know, my boss, or, you know, to me, or to let's say I had to go to Chris Wolf or Randy Wolf and say, look, this is what I'm going to do for the next hour. What do you feel like that's worth? Do you know what I mean? Like I'm going to be, you know, answering emails for an hour. How much would you pay me to do that, right? Like each hour of our day is really being compensated by the company. And the question is, what are we giving them for the hour, right? And you know, when you look at it from that light, a lot of the hours really are kind of like not what they should be, right? It's important that they all have value. So we want to make sure that each hour of that day that we're actually delivering something that the company would feel like, yeah, that's, hey, absolutely, that's worth the money for sure. Here you go. So the first thing, now that you see how the 80-20 rule applies to your day, next thing is to really understand, like, what are my key deliverables, right? This is where you need to understand what are your 20% of your duties that make up the 80% of the value, right? Because in our 80-20 rule, 20% of your week is worth 80% of your paycheck. Yeah, exactly. There's about one day of your week that's worth about 80% of what you make. So, if you're making, like it would be nice to work one day a week and make 80% of your salary, right? But that's about how it plays out, right? Because only about 20% of your week is probably really involved with delivering value. And the other 80% is a bunch of other stuff, right? So what I'd like to do on the Jamboard is sort of maybe put some ideas on that board about what you feel like on this board, that's page 2, what are the value activities that are definitely part of your 20%? What are the things you do each week that are the key things that you guys are delivering, and that you got hired to do, and you always feel like, oh yeah, this is what I should be doing, right? What are some of those things? You can just put them up here on stickies on the Jamboard. Checking units. I'll close my door here. So checking units, fab tickets, layouts, right?
I don't know, I can't edit it again. It became view only again. It's weird.
This is okay. Let me check here. Okay, anyone on the internet with this link can edit. Let me copy the link again, just in case.
When I reopen it, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah, and probably Chrome is a better browser than IE because IE has its issues. Yeah, I know, for me, my 20% is really when I'm working with the people that work for me, making sure we're working on the right things, like spending the time to make sure they have what they need, that we're clear on the goals, that we're working toward those goals. Another 20% thing for me is, going out and talking to the customers and understanding, how we're doing and how it's going for them on the job sites. And same with the shop and the field, walking the jobs and talking to the superintendents and going out and talking to the shop and seeing where we're at with things and what they need. And then hearing from you guys in the stand-ups, like any kind of things you guys are having problems with and things I can clear roadblocks for, right? So that's kind of mostly my 20%. And then if you switch to page 3, let's jump over and talk about what are the things that are low value activities that you guys see. Waiting to batch plot, or just batch plotting in general. Being in meetings that don't go anywhere. Waiting for UPD. Digging for information that should be given to you, right? Computer crashes, computer glitches, people that don't set up their Jamboard right, so you get like frustrated with them, stuff like that. What's an autopiloting? Yeah, changes, that kind of stuff for sure, right? Oh, I don't know, that might be a value, the fresh diesel. I like the pink sticky too. That's probably
Making
yeah. So part of it comes down to just being clear, right? Like, I mean, it's from the pages you guys gave me, like the value stuff versus the non-value stuff. You know, it looks like you're very clear about the kind of things that have value, right? And I think one of the things is like to make sure that you're clear on your goals. And the way to be clear about your goals is to understand, you know, who is your customer, right? In lean, we're trying to eliminate the waste through continuous improvement. And then waste is defined as anything that doesn't add value to our customer. So in order to like really understand the 20% versus the 80%, you know, you have to understand like who your customer is and what they value. And I think for you guys, you know, there's a lot of customers for your work, right? You've got your project managers, you've got the shop, you've got vendors, you've got field people. Like, I mean, there's a lot of people using the things that you guys are producing, you know, and they value it, right? I mean, this is how they get their work done. This is what tells them what to do, even, right? So I think it's you have a lot of customers. So the one question I'd ask you guys is like, if you go to sheet 4 of 6. So who's your number one customer? Look, of all those customers you have, who's the number one customer?
Chris Wolf and Randy.
No, the jobs.
I think it's your boss.
Your family is definitely one of your customers for sure. But in a work environment, maybe like, you know, we'll look at it from a work perspective. Because outside of work, you know, God, your family, there's probably a lot of other bosses to deal with it. But definitely, I think, you know, of all the people on this list, there's one person that controls what you do every day, how the company sees you, how much money you make, and pretty much, you know, defines exactly how you're going to go, right? And that's your boss, right? So whoever you report to has got to be, you got to consider them as your number one customer. Because if they're not happy, it's going to be really difficult for other people in the company to understand how well you're doing. So, you know, for most of you, that's Pete. And if, you know, if Pete's really happy with your work, you know, when I'm talking to Pete, he's like, oh man, yeah, Ron did such a great job on this job, or Pedro did such a great job on this setup. And that's what I'm hearing, right? I mean, I have my own opinions from little things I see, but if every week Pete's talking it up, right? Like who's that person and who sets those priorities? It's something that you really want to be clear on with Pete, right? It's like, okay, Pete, what are the top 3 things that I need to be doing? What are the key deliverables that I need to have, right? That you feel like this is what you need from me. Okay? And this is something I do with Nick a lot. Is we sat down a couple, like maybe a month ago, and I just showed him my calendar from the last three weeks. You know, and I said, look, this is what I've been doing. This is where my time is going, right? And I want to know, like, is this what you want me to work on? You know, am I working on the right things? I mean, or am I picking things that I like to do? And you're sitting over there going, man, why doesn't Steve why isn't he at the job site more? Or why isn't he doing this, right? So this is something that I do quite often is try to just bounce this off Nick and be like, hey, am I getting it done? Is, are the things I'm working on what you want? Do you need more of anything? Is there something I should be doing that I'm not? And just really understand, because if your boss is happy, believe me, there's nobody in the world that's gonna like have more impact on your career than if your boss really likes what you're delivering, right? So keep that in mind. It's a good way to look at it. So a lot of this stuff is PM related, because I know you guys have a little bit more, like the PMs are a lot more wide open on what they do every day, right? So one thing we talked about is what's on your calendar, like looking back at your calendar to see what you've been working on. But I think for you guys, it would be easier for you to look at the notes from the weeks, like what, because you guys are like reporting every week, like, okay, I'm working on this, I'm working on this, I'm working on this. So I think there might be better ways to look at it than a calendar for you guys, as far as what you're working on every day. And then, the other thing we talked to the PMs about is making sure they have a clear understanding. Never start your day without finishing it, in writing, because you want to write down, the day before exactly what you're planning on doing the next day and what it would mean to have a great day and really hit the ball out of the park. And I think this applies to the Takeoff group really well, because each day, if you've got a week of units to turn out, you can just do the math and go, look, I've got to make this many units, which means I have to do this many units each day, which means I need to get this many units done each hour, right? So you can kind of break that task down and know what you need to do, what your goal needs to be for the day, and know what it means to be winning, so that at the end of the week, Pete can mark off, yep, we released those units, yep, we got this done, yep, setup's all complete. So I think it's a good way to look at it too. This was a little story I heard one time when Charles Schwab was the owner of Bethlehem Steel back in the early 1900s, and he was one of the richest men in the world. The consultant Lee Ivey came to him and said, "Look, I can increase your productivity pretty greatly if you give me about 15 minutes with the people." And Schwab was a little hesitant and resistant, and he asked, "Well, what's it going to cost me?" And he says, "Look, tell you what, let me do it. And if after 3 months you just send me a check for whatever you think it's worth." So this is what the Ivy League method looked like. So at the end of each day, write down the 6 most important things you need to accomplish tomorrow. Write down more than 6. Prioritize them in order of the true importance. And then when you arrive the next day, just do the very first task until it's done, and then move on to the second task. Rest your list in the same way. And then at the end of the day, repeat the process, right? And when they looked at it, they gave it a try. After 3 months, Schwab liked it so much, he sent him a $25,000 check, which is the equivalent of about a $400,000 check in 2016 for about 15 minutes of Ivy League's time, right? So a great way to think about it is just working single task, getting things done, moving on to the next. The second thing we want to kick around here is just the idea of, about our PDCA cycle, plan, do, check, act. The Hansei, or the reflection, is the check step. That's when we stop and see how we're doing. Each time we do a setup, we would want to stop and see after, they start doing the tickets, how'd that go? What did we learn? What things could we have done better, right? If we're not doing that evaluation, and seeing where the problems are. It's kind of why we have you guys going out and picking up tickets at the shop, right? It's like, we made these tickets, we thought they were all good. What are you guys running into? What are you seeing? Same thing we're doing with the drafting group. We're asking for drafting feedback, right? What are you guys seeing? So this check step is one of the most important pieces, to take a little time and reflect, like, how are things going? And really, how can I make it better, right? So in Hansei, people say that practice makes perfect, but it's really perfect practice that makes perfect. Practice things that aren't right, then you're just going to sort of find bad habits, right? And experience is the best teacher, but actually it's a value-added experience that keeps you from repeating the same errors over and over. So again, just the same idea, end with the beginning in mind, right? Think about what it should look like when you get done. You know, look at the next day, figure out how it's supposed to look, and then work that out, right? So what are your goals for tomorrow? What things will need to get done, and put those in an order of priority. And then, you know, we talk about doing it at the end of the week, maybe on a Friday afternoon, at the end of the day, or, you know, on the weekend, but sort of really being intentional about what the following week needs to be, what things you need to do it. But, you know, are there things you need from people, and try to get that stuff lined up ahead of time so you can just hit the ground running on Monday. So Joseph had some things about, you know, some other things here, but I'm just going to skip ahead to a couple things here. This is one I really wanted to talk to you guys about because I think it's so critical for the kind of work, focus type of, is the idea of what we call a trading rhythm. So there's a circadian rhythm, which is how you know, when you sleep and when you're awake, right? That sort of night-day kind of cycle, right? But the ultradian rhythms are something they've measured, which is basically saying that most people have the best results by working in 30 to 90-minute blocks. And you guys gotta kind of play with what works for you. But the idea is that, you know, trying to work hard all day long isn't your best game. It's best to set a little timer for, let's say, an hour and a half or an hour or whatever works for you. And then headphones on, focused work, stop. Take a little break, check some email, make your phone call, whatever you're gonna do. 20 minutes later, come back, timer on, head down, headphones on, work, right? Trying to get those larger blocks of time to just focus on the work. But don't try to make it so long that you can't sustain the focus, right? One of the difficulties a lot of people run into is just, you know, any kind of interruption takes you out of your flow. So once you get into that flow, which usually takes about 30 minutes sometimes to get into a flow, like any kind of interruption will take you out and you have to get back into that flow again. So what you want to do is try to set yourself up for those uninterrupted blocks, right? Put yourself in a place where you can't be interrupted, so your mind isn't thinking it can be interrupted. It's why weekends at the office were always so productive, because you knew nobody was coming in, you knew nobody was going to bug you, right? So your mind can focus a lot clearer. So I think this is an important one, and one that I just wanted to bring up with you guys, because I feel like we have to be careful with the meetings we have. You know, on the Jamboard, there were a couple things about meetings being too long or meetings being not relevant. Like, when you think about where your time goes, you know, we need to be able to just make the meetings specific and measurable and necessary. And we don't need to have a 1 hour meeting because we scheduled a 1 hour block, right? It's okay to be done early, right? It's okay to end the training at 2:45 if that's when we're done. You don't have to go longer, right? So I think that's one thing I want to just bring up with you guys is, you know, if you have a deadline to get something done, and on Thursday, you're looking at your deadline going, look, I can't go to the engineering meeting today. I think you just call Pete and say, hey, you know, my top priority is to get this release out. I'm going to skip the engineering today. Let me know if there's anything I need to know, right? You got the notes. You can always go back and look. You can talk to somebody else later. But, you know, the meetings can't be the top priority. You know, because you have one doesn't mean you have to go to it if you have other priorities that are competing. Obviously, you can't let your teams down by not showing up to any of your meetings. But I don't want you to think that just because there is some kind of group meeting that you have no way to work around, right? Sometimes the work is the first thing. And again, Pete's your arbiter of these things. But I want to make sure you know, like, you can always talk to your boss and be like, look, hey, this week, I'm going to single task. I did this with Tina. She was struggling at home because she's got her, you know, her little daughter. She's trying to do everything else. I said, look, you know, skip the stand-ups for the next month, and I'll let you know if there's something I need to just send me something at the end of the day instead. Because she was having more focus time in the morning. My stand-up's at 8. So she was like starting at 7, and then at 8 she had to stop, do the stand-up, come back, you know, 20 minutes later and start in again. And skip the stand-ups and let's see how it goes, right? So think about when your schedules are. When we started doing the stand-ups, we put them at 11 and 11:15. because we're going to have them kind of close to lunch to not break up your day. But now your stand-ups are one group and they take 15 minutes. Maybe 11 o'clock isn't the best time for your stand-up anymore, right? Unless you guys eat lunch at 11:15 or 11:30, you know, do you really get something in that little break between the stand-up and your lunch, right? So just trying to think about how to get the largest blocks of uninterrupted time possible. Maybe schedule the meetings, you know, right before lunch, right after lunch, right at the end of the day, just to try to get those blocks to be bigger. Mornings are usually best for most people, so I hate to have morning meetings, you know, except for management people who, you know, that's not, you don't run that way. But for you guys, I just want to make sure you know that, like, we want you to have those big blocks to do the work. If you're feeling like that's not what's happening, then again, back to the 80-20 rule, right? Nobody put meetings in the most valued piece of the, you know, the 20% that's 80% of your salary, right? Nobody put meetings in that place. So, you know, some meetings have good value and some meetings are good for you to know what's happening in the company. At times, you know, there may be times when you have to skip a meeting here or there to do something that is the more important thing. Just keep that in mind. Just want to make sure we're not just running from thing to thing to thing. And it's like, oh man, I just can't get anything done today. It's like, we're picking those things, you know, and if you talk to your boss, what would they say? Yeah, go to all the meetings. I don't care if we get done on time. It's like, hey, let's skip the meetings this week and we'll do this. So I'm going to open this up to questions because my goal is to end this thing early. I have one last thought. This is our slide called Eat That Frog. There's a book out there called Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy. And the entire book is this one concept. Do the hardest thing or the worst thing first thing in the morning. His point is, if you have to eat a frog, eat that frog first thing and the rest of the day will be good. But if you're just thinking about that frog all day long, you won't get anything done. So whatever's hard, whatever's difficult, the most difficult things, do them first thing in the morning and get them out of the way. Like, don't open your email first thing in the morning. Don't, you know, jump on Zoom first thing in the morning. Take that first block of time, take your first 90 minutes and knock out the most important stuff. And start your day with Zoom, email, and things like that. So, all right, any questions, thoughts, comments?
Hey, Steve, where does continuous improvement fall into the work week? Because if you do continuous improvement, the only time you see value in it is if it actually gets used. And if you look at that hour, that scale that you had per hour, it would be 0 until they're, you know, like that story that you had.
Yes.
It's not worth anything until the person that you gave it to sees any value in it.
It's exactly, I mean, I definitely agree with you. And I would say that the thing that I would bring up on that is the idea of the reflection, right? So the way I would look at continuous improvement, it has to do with the cycle. Okay? For you guys, there's a natural 1 week cycle for the work you do. It would be great if you did the work over the course of the week, and on Friday afternoon, you took an hour and then you came up. What am I going to do next week? What's my goal? What's the goal? The following week, you try to execute that goal, and you keep notes over the course of that week. Not only are you going to set the goal for the next week, you just stop and do that Hansei, that reflection, and say, okay, what went well, and what didn't go well this weekend? The problems that I ran into. How could I improve this next week? How could I make sure that those same kinds of problems aren't coming into my work? Because I think those cycles are the key to this, right? Check, act, cycle. I mean, that's exactly how the Japanese, you know, worked out how to become the most quality, you know, country in the 50s and 60s, because they just worked it all in those cycles. Every time they have a problem, they'd stop, figure out why, solve the problem, and not really run into that problem. Right? To me, that's where that continuous improvement falls in is in those cycles of improvement. I mean, you might be in a Kaizen that's working on a process to make it better, but also just individually as a person, this is what I do every week. Evaluate what happened last week and why, and any kind of problems I ran into, and then I try to adjust my coming week to sort of address. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I understand the personal reflection. I think that's where the PTS kind of comes in, gives you feedback on your process. The Fab Tracker meetings that we have for the Takeoff group also gives feedback. But also, I mean, improvement in your own process, you know, not based on defects, but like kind of improvements on how you want to just kind of maybe speed up your flow or see how that fits in. But, you know, sometimes it doesn't always pan out like that idea. But when you're working on that, you're not working on work, right?
Yeah, and I can relate to that really well because that's exactly what happened to me. But I think it's okay because even the things you try, you learn from, right? So even if it doesn't pan out, you'll learn something that may pan out next time, right? So I think you build that into your week. Maybe time that you do that each week. That's exactly how I roll it too. Like I will be in here writing code probably 1.5 hours a week, and I don't think Nick's paying me to write code, but a piece of the week doesn't always result in something, but then a lot of times it does result in something. You just have to kind of build that into your week as part of the week. Because I think you do that too, right? You're looking for ways to improve.
You're cutting out, Steve.
Okay, but that's kind of how I do it too. Is I just plan a certain amount of time of the week, like maybe it's 1 or 2 hours, and that's something I work on every week. And if the thing doesn't pan out, I learn. If it does pan out, I gain. But either way, I'm gaining. Like as an individual and as part of the company, I'm sometimes learning things that don't work, and sometimes I'm learning things that do.
Okay. Yeah, that.
Yeah, I think the PDCA is important. Like scramble idea. I think a lot of people talking about scramble idea in this company. Actually, it's the sprint. Every time you set a sprint, end of sprint, you have to do PD back to the account, which you said.
Yeah, it's exactly, it's the value, right? It's the sprint is the cycle.
I'm not sure
and
you
then
can
that evaluation
it's not stable.
Yeah, and that evaluation at the end is the value, right? Because that's exactly like, just for instance, as an example, what happened last week, we didn't hit a goal.
Yeah.
We were
from point of view, I see much people doing that.
Yeah, we were working on something last week, and something was supposed to get completed, and we missed the goal. Like it didn't get completed. It got completed like this week, right? And as I ended my week, it was like, well, okay, I wasn't successful in the thing I was trying to do, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try a different method next time that will help me track that better. But again, it's just little things. It's like, okay, well, I didn't get the result I thought I would when I laid out my week, but I can try a different experiment next time to see if I can have an impact on that, right? But I try to do it in that weekly chunk. Just look at my week, what I think I'm going to get done, have it all planned out, go through my week, kind of keep my notes, and then at the end of the week I stop and I kind of evaluate, okay, how was my week? What problems did I run into? What things could I change, or how could I change them to have better results, and just to get a little better week, right? So somebody's boss is Patron, the #1 customer.
What?
Spanish.
Yes,
Patron.
Spanish. Patron.
Spanish.
Jefe.
Oh.
Pretty good. All right, guys. Well, like I said, I wanted to give you some thoughts on that. You know, the idea is to sort of just try to get clear on what the things you're trying to do are. You know, make sure you're clear with your boss on what they're looking for, and so you're on the same page. And the things you're working on, or the things try to work in cycles. Weekly is really great, so you can kind of plan the week, do the week, evaluate the week, and make some adjustments, right? And try to work your way through. And then, you know, add, like Chris said, add a little time for that continuous improvement. That might be a Kaizen event you're doing. It might be just, you know, researching something that could make something better. But, you know, spend a little time each week on that little bit of improvement. And I think those are the key things that I would suggest and that I found really helpful for me in my career. And we're going to be done early.
I'm trying to think about this frog that it's made out of pistachio ice cream. It makes me have a better feeling about the frog.
It is a pretty green frog, I believe.
Pistachio ice cream.
Exactly. All right, guys. Have a great Thursday. Go be productive.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, thank you, Steve.
Thanks,
Thank
Steve.
you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for the topic you picked.
It was fun.